Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Howdy y'all, Red O'Loughlin here. We're now on the Wise Ones on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And my guest today is a good personal friend of mine, Tom McNulty, and we'll be talking to him very, very shortly. This is my middle show, back to back to back. I have 3 shows every Thursday, starting around 11 Central and every hour from there. I guess my background is I'm a researcher. I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem, treat symptoms, and you generally will never fix the problem. The symptoms are there, and the problem could get worse. I write about it, I speak about it, I concentrate on longevity and age-related issues. I also am a book coach. I published, independent publisher. I published over 50 books for other people. And when I'm not doing that, I have these 3 shows that I do for USA Global TV and Radio Network every Thursday. Enough about me. Let's go ahead and get to my guest today, Tom McNulty. Tom, please join me up here on stage. You're muted, sir.
Okay, got me now?
I can hear you now.
Outstanding. Great to see you.
Always good to be seen and viewed, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we share lunch generally once a month, and we bumped into each other a few other places. So I know that you started way back at Yale, and you said, college football, there's some little things that are tweaking a little differently. And should we talk about it or not? I think, I think it's of interest because maybe not everybody knows. So take it away.
Sure. I had the privilege, as you said, I did go to Yale, and at the time we had Hall of Fame coach Carm Koza, the late Carm Koza. It was a really great program, a lot of tradition. He coached there for 30 years, and it was a great way to experience football where there was still a big emphasis on academics. And so I think the Ivies had a unique way of approaching competitive sports. Some other schools do as well. And I think what's changing is we're seeing really the professionalization of college football. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I mean, I have mixed feelings, but it is what it is. I just think that there's a bit of chaos right now. The notion of teams, I came in with freshmen. We played 4 years together. There's a lot of movement with the transfer portal. So I think it's a big change. And, we have to be concerned about young people. These are young people, and it could be vulnerable. And I just think that, I hate to say we need regulation, but we just have to keep an eye on it. It may be getting a little bit out of control. We'd like to see maybe some structure.
How many people go to Yale? I have no idea. I just
my class was 1,200 with the graduate schools. I think the overall size of the school is probably now in the 10 or 12,000 range. It has pretty large graduate school community as well. It's a very old school, dating back to 1701.
Wow. It's an area I've been in and around, but not to that. So I was just kind of curious. You graduated and then you ended up in the Foreign Service. Tell people about that.
Sure. When I was in school in the 80s, I had an interest in public service. My degree technically in history, but really in military and diplomatic history and in the history of intelligence. Yale has a great tradition in that space. Went through the process to enter the Foreign Service. It's a very old part of the government, part of the State Department, going back to the early days of the country. If you think about when the United States became a brand new country, it had to have relations with foreign powers starting in London and Paris, and so had to create a professional diplomatic corps. So it's almost as old as the country. There's Senate-approved commissions. You go through training. There's language training, and it's essentially the people who staff the embassies and consulates overseas. And in Washington, it's the big building on C Street that is the sort of the foreign policy bureaucracy in a sea of other departments. As you know, Washington has gotten to be quite big.
Earlier this month, we were at a military luncheon, and the guest speaker was talking about the Ukraine war. And he showed a little blip there. You were sitting next to me at another table, and I guess somebody shouted something out because it was a personally recorded video of whatever. And I understand. Yeah, you asked some questions about some words because the guy that was giving it was a Ukrainian, and so you understand foreign languages because you have to understand them for wherever you're at. So you're at Minsk, just north of Ukraine. Tell us about that.
Well, I studied Russian at Yale, and also have a good reading background in French. Because I wound up stationed in Southeast Asia, I was in the Philippines. I wound up picking up a lot of Tagalog. Yeah, so I had Russian kind of in an academic setting. In the government language training, not unlike the military schools, are very practical. So it's aggressive, hands-on speaking skills. Had 6 months at the language school in Virginia. At the time we opened embassies in the former Soviet republics, after the fall of the Soviet Union, we found the Russian speakers to send them because that made sense. Many of these countries have their own languages. There is a Belarusian language. There's certainly Ukrainian. The so-called stands have local languages, which are generally very Turkic. But the point was to get Russian speakers there initially because that was a language of government. And in some cases, it still is. When we were at the lunch, the video that we saw was, it was essentially Russian. Ukrainian and Russian have tremendous similarities, but in the eastern part of Ukraine, where most of the war is being fought, it's largely Russian speaking, so I could figure out what they were saying on the video. It is a touchy subject. Ukrainians have their own language, their own culture, their own country, but I mean, there are definitely similarities. A lot of words are the same. Belarusians, the same thing. I mean, there's a great deal of crossover.
My last couple of years in the military, I was in Stuttgart, Germany, and back and forth across 30 countries in Europe for a variety of reasons. And I noticed when I go into, Poland or Czech Republic or, Budapest, whatever. Anyway, some of the languages are very similar because Dobrý den, jak se máš? And that's almost common, but it's slight variation, Dobrý den, Dobrý den, Dobrý den, and so it's, you can kind of pick it up, and I understand what you're saying. It really makes a lot of sense that you have somebody there that is proficient at being able to handle conversations, whether it's government or personal or whatever. I can't sit there at a bar and have a conversation in German. I run out of words to say in about 3 or 4 minutes. But I've always been admired by the languages and similarities and things. And I saw something the other day on Navajo, and it's probably one of the most difficult languages in the world to master because it's just so many different iterations in there. But anyway, so you speak a little bit of Tagalog, and that's Filipino. You speak a little Russian, and you say you understand French. Anything else?
No, that's it. And you made a great point on languages, how they blend into each other. One of the things that struck me when I was in the Philippines, I never had studied Spanish. So when I learned words in the Philippines, many of the nouns are from Spanish. And so when I got back to the US and wound up in Texas, you'd hear words like mesa or zapatos or bruja, and I thought they were Filipino words for shoes or table or witch, when in fact they were Spanish words. The Spanish got there in the 16th century. Tagalog is not Spanish, especially verbs. It's a different language. It's closer to Bahasa Malaya or Bahasa Indonesia, but there are nouns that the Spanish brought there. So that was a fascinating dynamic. It's a very English-speaking country, too, because of our own period there starting in 1898 after Dewey and the Battle of Manila Bay.
You're starting to show your history background.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating story. It was an accident. It's almost by accident. I mean, I don't think we set out to suddenly possess the Philippines, but we wound up with that nation. And then there's a huge, of course, World War II story, MacArthur. And it's a fascinating country, wonderful people, probably about 100 million now. It's a beautiful place outside of the big cities, which are very big. And I know you were a naval officer. When I was there, our bases were still there. Clark, big Air Force base, Subic, QB Point Naval Air Station, big role post-World War II, Cold War, very busy during Vietnam. And now, of course, those bases were turned over in 92 when I was leaving. We are back, I think, in kind of a more of a leasing rental kind of agreements because of a lot of stressors in the South China Sea, and of course with Taiwan. So it's a very strategic place.
Yeah, I flew out of QB Point during Vietnam, and I love that whole area over there. The Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines. We flew 10 days out of the Philippines, 10 days out of Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam, 10 days out of Utapao, Thailand. That was my rotational. Every month we were, in those places for 10 days at a time. And so it was interesting from so many different ways. But anyway, getting back to you, you had your foreign service. I know that one of the things you talked about at least once is when Russia invaded the Ukraine. And do you have some insights as to what happened then that you want to share now, or anything else which ongoing now?
Well, a lot of, don't want to turn to a long history discussion, but there's a substantial, I'll use the word paranoia in Russia of foreign invasions, largely from the east, but also from the west. Certainly, the summer of 1941, the German invasion, Barbarossa. There is a paranoia. In no way am I defending the events or what the Russians have done, but there is a sensitivity there that they have this sense that they're going to be invaded constantly. Even if it's not true, they won't listen to you. And so they like the idea of borders, of buffer zones. Belarus, in many ways, is a client state, very allied with Moscow. Ukraine, as an independent nation, potentially as a NATO member, caused them concerns. Again, in no way defending what they did, but I mean, it was something that I would think our intelligence services had on the radar. Certainly a concern that there might be an invasion, or at least an attempt to expand on territory taken. They took Crimea and some of the areas right along the border, Donbass region. And so to some degree, it should have been on the radar or foreseen, probably was within the intelligence world and NATO. It's violent, it's brutal, it's turned into very much a tough stalemate, almost trench warfare. I don't know that I can predict an outcome, but it's just, the leadership in Moscow and this regime, which started really late 90, probably 99 on Putin, the man who runs Belarus, Lukashenko, has actually been in power longer. There's been talks in Washington lately that he may be invited to Washington, perhaps a rapprochement of some type. We don't really have a presence there. I don't think there's an active embassy there right now. But the regime in Moscow is very long-standing and in some ways signals what it's going to do, the notion of a reconstitution of the former Soviet Union. The current leader, Putin, has said publicly, this is not hidden information, that he views the loss of the Soviet Union as a disaster, the worst thing that ever happened in his life. So we have to pay attention to what people say. There's a tendency to think that people bluster, but history teaches us that we need to pay attention. We know the events of before World War II, when there were things said and actions taken that proved to be exactly what was going to happen. So we can't put our head in the sand and pretend that they're just talking. So I don't know how predictable it was in terms of when the exact attack was going to come, but this is something that should have been on the radar. It's a dangerous regime. They have a powerful military, powerful weapons, a long tradition, particularly in the Red, going back to the Red Army. The Navy has not been that big traditionally, or as emphasized as the ground forces and the Air Force. So I think it's a tragic situation, and love to see a resolution, but it's a stalemate right now as far as I can tell.
Well, one of the things that I noticed the first year or so was the fact that the drones, drone warfare has just taken its own stage, and the ability to guide them somewhat accurately, the ability to make them almost overnight, it seems like, that has changed so many different things in the way we think about fighting battles and everything. We're seeing that now in Iran.
I know you're a naval aviator, and it's you're familiar with aviation, and I think there's an asymmetry. I mean, if you can build a drone with a 50-pound warhead that's maybe $40,000, but it costs $500,000 to shoot it down, that asymmetry causes problems. We're seeing it with the Iranians. Their drone model, I think, is widely used by the Russians. They may produce it on their own now. But again, pay attention to history. I think we don't teach history well in high school. No, very few major in it anymore in college. Think about the V1. What the Germans developed in World War II, in many ways, is the original idea for this notion of an unmanned drone. Now, those weren't really guided. They would basically fly over London, run out of gas and drop, but they had big warheads, killed a lot of people. But that's 80 years ago. So, we have to pay attention to the past to make sure we understand what's coming.
It's interesting. Just this past week, there was an article on A-10s, the Warthog, the very low-flying, close air support. And I know the Air Force has been trying to get rid of them for years, and they just keep hanging around. And now all of a sudden they're over there, and they're a very formidable weapon with a cannon that they can, in fact, economically eliminate a lot of drones at not that $500,000 a missile cost. And so now they've kind of been resurrected back into, and plus the fact they can land almost anywhere. It's a pretty rugged aircraft. And so that's something that's changed. It's like we take tanks out of war, we try to take something else out. Maybe that wasn't so smart. I think that's what they're seeing now with the A-10, because there's no replacement for it.
Well, I think it's great. I love, as you know, the group we're part of, we meet every month, but my heart is always close to the Navy or naval officer. My grandfather was in the Pacific, World War II. My dad was a naval officer, not a flyer like yourself, so, destroyers. And I think what we also forget is sea lanes, maintaining freedom of the seas. And instead of the United States being accused of trying to dominate sea lanes, we hear this in the Asia Pacific region. It's really just trying to keep them open. And the importance of sea power. We inherit a lot of our traditions, and you would know this from the Royal Navy, and the notion of keeping sea lanes open for commerce and trade. And so we're now seeing this issue with the Hormuz Strait. And if you make the Navy too small, it can be a problem, right? And right now, our allies, I think the Royal Navy probably has never been smaller than it is now. I don't know how big any of the NATO navies are. Our ship numbers are pretty low if you look historically. And so, again, ignoring the past, we have to pay attention. And there's always an eagerness to get rid of a weapon system, an airframe, certain types of ships. It can be dangerous because it doesn't mean you're trying to fight the last war. But you have to pay attention to just the physical reality of the planet and where the choke points are, not just Hormuz, but the Red Sea. And the Red Sea has been a problem as well.
And there's several other choke points as you get down toward Singapore and that part, trying to come up with the Philippines. I used to think that China was a formidable enemy, but they don't have their own oil to speak of, and they don't have the ability to transportation logistics to get point A to point B to point C. But that's something we can come back here. We're a few seconds away from coming up on a commercial break. So sure. Why don't we kind of continue down the same thought path? Because I get some things I wanted to share with you on that one. So we will be back here in about a minute and a half. And Tom, just stand by. We'll be continuing.
Excellent.
In a noisy world, true connection begins with listening. Elevated listening transforms every conversation in just 5 simple steps. Pause and breathe. Set your intention. Listen with curiosity. Reflect back. Agree on one next step. Join the Listening Mentor on Let's Finally Talk with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the Listening Mentor, where we help you find inner peace, one conversation at a time. Streaming every day, Let's Finally Talk TV show with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, only here on USA, Global TV and Radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channels to watch and engage with all our content.
Brett O'Loughlin here. We're on The Wise Ones on USA Global TV and Radio Network. My guest today is Tom McNulty. Tom, please join me back up here on stage.
Great to be back.
We're talking about choke points and things. My last, almost toward the end of my career, we're talking about littoral warfare, taking what we used to do to protect port security and harbor defense in the United States and take that and export it to wherever we need it in the world. And that's kind of what we're seeing to some degree now in the Straits of Hormuz, and like I say, it could be almost anywhere. But I used to do exercises all the time with a bunch of units I had in Korea and Bahrain, because you're trying to integrate with the locals in order to help them, but also to work out the way things are supposed to work. And not everything works according to plan. It just, as much as you think, hey, that looks pretty good on paper, it doesn't work that way in real life.
No, that's correct. And you had touched on before the break, Asia Pacific region, I mean, Straits of Malacca. I've been there. It's very narrow. And when you come around south, down around Singapore, they're not wide open bodies like the Atlantic or Pacific. The China Sea, you think about how long ago when I was in the Philippines, that's a long time ago. And there were issues in the South China Sea then, with the Spratlys, the Paracel Islands. So this has been a tricky area for a while. And you touched on China. China, similar to the Russians, they never had what I call a great naval tradition like we have had, which we inherited from the British, but also in our Revolutionary War, the great frigates, the Constitution. We started out understanding the importance of a U.S. Navy. President Jefferson sent the Navy and the Marines over to North Africa to fight the Barbary Pirates. I think that was as early as 1801. In China, it's the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, and the Air Force and the Navy are part of the PLA. And that's a little unusual. And so they have caught up. They built a lot of ships, but traditionally they're not a blue water Navy. Like you mentioned, littoral, there's kind of brown water Navy, which is the riverine. And then the coastal, that's been their tradition. They have tried to catch up by building larger fleet, destroyers, cruisers, carriers. I don't know how many they have, but that's a little newer to them. So that may be an area where they are still behind. I'd like to think that we still have the ability to project sea power on more than one theater. The problem with Iran now is, we have to be paying attention to other parts of the world like the Asia Pacific region. And it's just a dangerous time right now. Very dangerous.
Well, we can keep talking on this topic for a while, and I want to get into the energy sector because that's something you're doing nowadays. You were in Enron just before it collapsed. You said that was the reason you came to Texas. So tell us a little bit about Enron.
Sure. When I left government service, I went to get my MBA, went to Northwestern. And at that time, there was a lot of recruiting. Enron was recruiting heavily across the business school community. I think that I should quickly point out how I kind of got into energy real quick, still linked to government service. I had a tour at State working in energy security. And I always share this story because it's a fun story. I had an assignment by my boss on the weekend. I was young. It was a Friday. I was thinking, no, I had homework. I was actually annoyed. The assignment was to read a book called The Prize by Daniel Yergin, best-selling book, well-known. Right now in Houston is CERA Week here, and that's his former company, CERA. The book is about energy, but in the context of security, national security. Energy is really not just a business. And I couldn't put the book down. So I was bitten by the energy bug and kind of decided I maybe need to try to see what the private sector was like. left to do my MBA. Coming out of business school, Enron at the time, particularly Enron International, recruited heavily people with military and government backgrounds. Enron International was very active in the developing world, building energy assets, pipelines, doing oil and gas development, power generation. And so I was kind of a recruit that they looked at, someone who came from a government background. I worked with several folks in Enron who had military backgrounds, including I had a boss who was a naval aviator like yourself. Other parts of Enron were more domestic, trading. It was a huge company. But it was an opportunity, brought me to Houston. And this summer will mark 30 years here. I've never left. It's the energy capital of the world. Enron brought a lot of people here who had no experience in Texas, a lot of finance people with deep analytical backgrounds, plus the government background. So that's how I wound up here. It was a fascinating experience, including how it ended. I had left. I was 2 years. I left 2 years before the collapse. But you tend to overlook the good, forget about the good when there was a spectacular collapse like that. Enron brought a lot of folks to Houston that kind of broadened the human capital base here. And in the international division, they didn't have any trading. It was very much development of assets and assets that are still in existence. It wasn't really a trading company. It was building greenfield power plants, pipelines in the developing world. And linking back to the Philippines had an energy crisis. When I was there, the power went out every day. We had generators. The embassy had generators. The bases had generators. My apartment building had generators. But in a developing world country that's 100 degrees, it's very tough on the populace. And Enron International, we were operating throughout Southeast Asia, did work in the Philippines, Latin America, Africa. There was a part of the group working in Europe, which is not the developing world, but it was still greenfield, building power plants, pipelines. So there's an asset of energy is physical. And I think people forget that. It can be conceptual, but it's a very physical industry, and it's predicated on physics and thermodynamics that you can't change, even if you want to. It's a real world business.
I know that you built your career and financial and this and that and everything, and then you finally started your own company. But you started at the beginning of COVID. What happened there?
Well, it was basically an opportunity to something I'd always wanted to do. And then I was concerned I would wait too long and be afraid to do it. Had a lot of mentors, probably 24 people here in finance, lawyers, CPA firms that said, we'll help you. You should give it a shot. So I went ahead and did it. And I found that it's exhilarating, really, when you have a network. Again, I've been here for a very long time. And so people would call and ask me to help them and didn't really seem to care where I was working. I value the experience I had at bigger companies and bigger consulting firms and in banking, actually, with my securities licenses. But I found that if you're working with very small companies, lower middle market companies, really $50 million businesses and below, they don't get served by bigger firms. Not out of a bias, it's just not practical. I mean, the fees don't work. There's a huge market of small private family-owned businesses, hundreds of them, that need help. And people like me can help them. Bigger companies physically can help them, but the fee structures don't work.
What exactly do you do in your company to help others?
It's 3 pieces, real simple. I use the energy skills and the finance skills, even some accounting skills, management skills, to do really 3 things. One is valuation work. Valuation work generally has to be independent, particularly for tax purposes. Estate and gift tax has to be independent. So I independently value companies and their stock. And that's a chance to get to know the business. Sometimes that also supports a transaction, which feeds the second piece, which is transaction services. A lot of my work in corporate energy companies was M&A related, buying, selling assets, buying companies. So I work with smaller companies to help them navigate the complexities of transactions. The third piece, more by accident, when you have experience and you're a little older, I'm starting to do more and more litigation work. And that's, again, it's the same skill set. It's valuation and transaction skills. But when I testify as an expert, again, being here so long, I know lots of lawyers. And over time, a few of them just ask, can you help me with a case? And then they ask, well, are you willing, is it okay if you are a testifying expert? I know it can be a pain. You get beat up and attacked in deposition. The other side's job is to attack you. And I said, sure, I'll give it a try. So I'm doing a lot more of that, which is challenging. So 3 pieces: valuation, transactions, and litigation work.
Did you ever have any surprises at your attacks there in the courtroom?
Well, yeah. I guess I haven't had one yet. I've done testifying work now. I've only about 10 of them. So I'm a little newer to it. You prepare with the lawyers, and usually my work is report based because we're arguing over the value of a company. That's the vast majority of what I do. So their expert has a report, I have a report, and it's in evidence. So generally, that you're basically defending your report. So I haven't had an outright surprise yet. That happens in testimony work, but mine's a little narrower. And so we argue over value, and a lot of it is subjective. So it can be kind of fun. There's a lot of art involved. People want it to be scientific, but with privately held companies that are 10, 20, $30 million businesses, there's a lot of subjectivity that is unavoidable.
Leadership, the smaller companies, do you see them, because they don't have as many complexities and interfaces and people, do you see any difference in leadership between a $1 billion company and a $50 million company?
Very much so. Having worked in 3 large energy companies, Fortune 100 energy companies, there's more layering, there's more emphasis placed on development of talent as you advance, and delegation, and they're more bureaucratic. Naturally, some of these are very big companies, and so, a lot of the leadership at very high levels are setting direction, strategic direction, and then delegating down. In small privately held companies, generally I see one person running the business. It's usually the founder, and they often don't like to delegate, and they often don't like to do a lot of hiring. So they tend to be very lean companies. They could probably use an extra finance or accounting person, and maybe not an in-house lawyer, but more outside legal help. But generally an entrepreneur is 100% focused on building out the commercial business, and they're just not structured at all. I found at all like large companies.
Gentleman I had on earlier today on the corner bookstore, we're talking about we get trained for our job, whether it's supervisory or accounting or whatever it is, and we don't usually look at training ourselves. And that's, you end up as an entrepreneur and you get so tied up in everything, and then you get people problems, you get this kind of, and then you get government, you get all sorts of things, supply chain. It gets inundating at times. Where can you have a short success story where you've helped somebody that was floundering and say, hey, we came in there, we did boom, 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 and now they're thriving?
Yeah, I think in a particular, one of the first clients I had, probably at the time, maybe at a $15 million company, where you have the entrepreneur who's brilliant, hardworking, 80 hours a week, building a business that's growing rapidly, but basically didn't want to kind of let people in, open the tent a bit, very, very close to the vest, which is fine. And you want to maintain confidentiality. What I helped initially, the idea was, what's the business worth now, but what could it be worth? So more of a modeling exercise as to where you could be in 3 to 5 years with growth, or maybe add-on acquisitions, but also, where do you bring in people that are critical? And the finance and accounting function was in very bad shape. And I basically helped them understand that you're not going to get a good valuation if you sell your company, because they don't trust the numbers. You're just typing stuff into Excel, and there really was no accountability. The other point I made is you don't have to hire an expensive lawyer in-house, but you need legal advice. I've worked on lawsuits where there was no documentation of the stock. And so you can be exposed to being attacked, where there's no real documentation of the structure of the company, of who owns what. And those fees are very small compared to what you may pay later in a lawsuit. So I think with rationalizing a finance and accounting function with just a couple of people who could be contractors and building out a process to have budgeting and forecasting, still run your business the way you've built it, but have some modeling. The use of Excel to come in, this is what it looks like in a year or two. And it helped him basically have some discipline, which allowed him to focus on the right things to grow organically. No bolt-on acquisitions as yet. There was a chance to, kind of focus on things that were not as fun as running in the business, but they had to be done. It's what I call the blocking and tackling.
The old fun issue.
Right.
It's like aviators. They want to fly, but they get senior and they get put behind a desk somewhere. They still want to fly. All the fun is gone.
Right.
But there's an amazing amount of knowledge and expertise and wisdom. And it sounds like that, we don't think about selling a company. And if you structure right, you're going to make a lot of money. But if you don't, they could be tied up in who knows how many different things. And all of a sudden, that equity you had no longer exists, or it may have been invisible to begin with. And now all of a sudden it's gone, or a large chunk of it. So it sounds pretty, I think always great. You need the right person at the right time in order to help you. May not need them 100% of the time, but you do need them. You need their skill.
To be a trusted advisor. I mean, when you build the trust and you have folks that come back to you, maintain their confidentiality when they call and say, look, I need your opinion on something. And the legal profession is good at this because they've been doing it for hundreds of years, where they're but they're the trusted advisor, but it's within the context of the law. And I can introduce clients to lawyers. I do that all the time, but they can bounce other things off me that are not legally related. Just, what do you think I should do? Do I need a CFO or do I need a controller? Should I, my IT is just not very good. How do you do that? And I can introduce them to firms that'll come in and fix it, and they have to pay for it, but it's still cheaper. It's always cheaper than the disaster at the end of the road. And also valuation enhancements. As a valuator, I can tell them how much more their company is worth if they fix some things, and the ROI is always very high, because a buyer will come in and say, I'll buy your company, but because I don't know about these three things, I start to put a discount on it. And for them to avoid getting hit with a discount or a haircut, fix 2, 3, 4 things now. And then if you sell or raise capital, you're not selling, but you're bringing in some outside money, you don't get ripped off, basically.
Okay. We're toward the end of the show here, Tom. How do people get in touch with you? You have anything going on that people need to know about?
No, I just, I have that email. I know it's a bit long, but I take email very seriously. I always try to respond. That's how to reach me if I can help with valuation issues, certainly in the energy space, and certainly transaction help, and certainly lawyers who need expert help. Happy to do that, and always like to meet new people and build on the base of small, closely held companies. Really the engine of America. The big corporations get the headlines, and they should, but there are thousands and thousands of small, privately held companies, and that's really what builds the bulk of the American economy. And nobody knows who they are, and they work in the quiet. And I enjoy helping them and getting to know them and helping them to grow.
Well, Tom, thank you so very much. For our audio audience, will be later on today. This is all live right now. But for our audio audience, Tom.McNulty, McNulty, Tom.McNulty at tjmcnultyandcompany.com. That yes. McNulty, McNulty. Tom, thank you so very much. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Thank you for that. And I look forward to our next lunch together.
Yeah, I'll see you soon, hopefully in April, and have a great weekend. Great to see you, Red.
I shall do my best. Take care. Bye now.
Bye.
Reverend Laughlin, we're wrapping up The Wise Ones on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. My next show is called Talking Heads, and my topic is how does sleep affect aging? And so I'll go into a lot of detail with regard to hallmarks of aging and how sleep affects the different aspects of each hallmark. Talk a little bit about health, disease. Anyway, sleep has a major factor in everything we do. It's one of our lifestyle choices. You know, when do we go to sleep? When, you know, just lots of things. So anyway, please join me in about 23 minutes here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. My show will be Talking Heads, and Reverend Laughlin signing off for today. Take care, y'all. Bye now.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.